female icons in the horror genre have grown over the years, but it seemed like they really started becoming more celebrated in the 80s, with the final girl trope becoming the staple of the genre it is today. But one of the true standouts in the genre is a woman who's comfortable as not only the hero role, but also can step into the shoes of the monster without batting a perfectly mascaraed lash. And the icon we're talking about on this episode of What the F*** Happened to This Horror Celebrity is able to do exactly that. Her name is Barbara Crampton, and she's without a doubt a queen of the horror scene. From dealing with Randy's severed heads to becoming a blood-drinking bombshell, Barbara Crampton has built up a library of the macabre with a legion of fans who love her. So get ready to make room for the wife as we find out what the f*** happened to Barbara Crampton. Barbara Crampton was born on December 27, 1958 in New York. Her father worked with the carnival circuit, and as a child, Barbara would go with him during her summers not attending school. Growing up in Vermont, she attended college at Castleton State College. No Castle Freak jokes, please. At least not yet. Catching the acting bug in high school, Barbara graduated with a major in theater arts. Barbara headed out to LA and started acting in the classic soap opera Days of Our Lives, and started getting roles in various TV projects as well as the feature film Body Double in 1984. But it was the following year that she'd land a role in a project that would change her life and the entire horror genre forever. Reanimator brought H.P. Lovecraft home for many who may not have heard of the author and his twisted, dark world of horror, but for the decades after it hit big and small screens over the world, the genre would see the name grow in the hearts and slowly losing sanity minds of fans. Stuart Gordon and Brian Yuzna's masterpiece would mesh together a little-known group of stories about a scientist named Herbert West who brought to life the dead in his never-ending quest to defeat death. In this version, set in modern times at Miskatonic University, Herbert, played by the also legendary Jeffrey Combs, moves in with Dan Kane, played by Bruce Eckert. Dan's girlfriend Megan is also the dean's daughter, and the secret object of desire of the university's star teacher, Dr. Carl Hill, who was brought to sinister life by David Gale. Barbara got the role of Megan in the second go-round of auditions after the first actress who got the role backed out due to certain things that happened in the movie. Specifically, her mother read the script and emphatically told her no, she would not be doing that part. Megan Halsey, as played by Barbara, is a dose of grounded reality within the wacky film that's filled with blood, dark humor, and pure, twisted insanity. Stuart Gordon's vision was unleashed on screen with the film, and Dan and Megan's doomed romance brings a sweet heart to the crazy. Of course, everyone wants to talk about that scene, but I think it's more important to comment on the fact that in a movie with a severed head walking around with its body carrying it in a bag, giant intestines that explode out of torsos to strangle people, that everyone, including Crampton, played this movie seriously and gave some fantastic performances. So much so that Stuart Gordon was, according to the actor's commentary, furious at the amount of snot from Bruce Abbott because he was crying so hard during the scenes of Crampton's Megan dying. Reanimator has gone on to become a legendary film in the annals of horror, and the movie opened the door for Barbara Crampton's work with Gordon to continue, seeing her reunite with co-star Jeffrey Combs for more than a few times. The following year, Barbara would co-star in two fan favorites, Chopping Mall and From Beyond. Chopping Mall is possibly the most 80s horror film you will find in the era, taking place in said mall, following some killer robots who are one by one offing the teenagers who picked a bad night to party in the closed shopping center. From Beyond was Barbara's second collaboration with Stuart Gordon and Jeffrey Combs. It would also be another story taken from the works of H.P. Lovecraft. In this film, Barbara plays Dr. Catherine McMichaels, who is brought in to treat the accused murderer Dr. Crawford Tillinghast, who has been arrested and brought to a psychiatric hospital after the headless body of his partner, Dr. Pretorius, is found in their creepy castle-like home. It's there that they've been experimenting with a device called the Resonator, something that will open the portals within the human mind and allow us to see beyond normal human limits. As you can imagine, this doesn't go well for anyone involved. Crampton's role is of a reserved woman out to control her emotions because of her own personal history with madness. As the film proceeds, we see the effects of the Resonator on Catherine as it awakens another side to her and also transforms Crawford into something else beyond human. It should be noted here that Barbara Crampton did her own screaming for Reanimator, and in From Beyond, she delivers a great final manic laugh too. From Beyond and Reanimator are both really fearless movies when it comes to the subjects they are talking about, and Gordon and company don't shy away from the gore or the more disturbing side of our psyches, and that's something he would delve into throughout his career. In 1988, Gordon, Crampton, Combs, and David Gale teamed up again for the lost film Pulse Pounders, in a segment called The Evil Clergyman, another H.P. Lovecraft adaptation. As I said, this project had been considered lost for years, but a work print of The Evil Clergyman was found in 2011 and was restored and released on DVD. The segment has Combs as the titled Evil Clergyman, who was Crampton's lover who killed himself in the house that she returns to. Crampton's Mrs. Brady finds out some disturbing truths about her dead paramour, not only from those she meets, but by his ghost who returns, and the human-faced rat, which he apparently created in his spare time. Much like Gordon's previous Lovecraft works, The Evil Clergyman is filled with twisted horrors and a heavy dose of sexuality, and the ending is not one you'd expect. Barbara would be a part of a number of Full Moon productions through the 90s, including Trancers 2 and Robot Wars. This would lead to another horror project with Stuart Gordon and Jeffrey Combs, yet again tackling some dark subjects with some hideous monsters, with Castle Freak in 1995. In this film, Barbara and Jeffrey are a married couple dealing with a terrible accident that killed their young son and blinded their daughter. After inheriting a castle, the troubled family moves in and discovers, well, the title character is alive and stalking inside the walls of their new home. Castle Freak is a fantastic film and has some amazing performances throughout, including Jonathan Fuller as the Castle Freak. Crampton and Combs, though, shine in this, as the couple having to come to terms with their own personal tragedies. The metaphor of the ugly monster hiding behind the walls of a family home is strong here and works beautifully. In 2020, Barbara would actually produce a remake of the film. Barbara would team up again with Stewart in 1996 for Space Truckers, a sci-fi comedy about space truckers that would star Stephen Dorff and Dennis Hopper. She continued working in various TV and film projects throughout the rest of the 90s and early 2000s, when in 2011, she was approached specifically to star as the matriarch Aubrey Davison in the Adam Wingard mega horror hit You're Next, a movie that surprised audiences and critics alike. Crampton told Entertainment Weekly she was shocked and didn't believe the filmmakers asked for her specifically and kept asking if they wanted her to audition. Her agent basically told her, "Do you want the part or not?" She did, and the film would go on to make 26 times its budget back at the box office. The experience would lead Crampton to go back into acting more. She said, "Even before the movie went to the Toronto Film Festival and did so well and got bought by a bidding war, I knew that I wanted to come back to the genre because of the experience that I had on that film. I said to my agent, 'Thank you for not dropping me. I want to get back into the business. Could you please look for some more roles for me?'" This would lead to a renaissance for Barbara and a return to horror royalty with a number of film roles in movies like Rob Zombie's Lords of Salem and the eerie slow burner, no pun intended, We Are Still Here, which co-starred Larry Fessenden. The film is a favorite of many and an effective ghost story with one hell of an ending. In 2015, Crampton would star and executive produce the indie shocker Road Games, a film that's a twisting and turning horror flick that you won't see coming until it stabs you. The following year, Barbara would star and produce the homage to VHS and VHS board games Beyond the Gates. At first, the film was only to be a producer role for Barbara, but after the original actress's scenes for the role of Evelyn, the game host, didn't work out, Barbara stepped into the part and it worked like a dream, or a nightmare, might be more apt. In 2017, Barbara joined the cast of the horror movie Expendables Death House, which was co-written by Leatherface himself, Gunnar Hansen. The film would co-star horror legends like Tony Todd, Sid Haig, Kane Hodder, and Dee Wallace, just to name a few. In 2021, though, Barbara helped bring to life a new take on an old monster in one of my favorite films she's ever done. Jacob's Wife was produced by Barbara and starred her in the title role of a woman stuck in a marriage and a life that hasn't turned out quite the way she expected. Anne's husband Jacob is the town pastor, and Anne slowly realizes her life is in a rut as she's hit middle age. A chance encounter with a vampire changes everything, including Anne herself. Jacob's Wife is a darkly funny and biting, pun intended, commentary on women of a certain age and why we shouldn't underestimate them. It also shows Crampton looking amazing and dangerous as a character and actor not to be taken for granted. It's a great performance in film that quickly became one of the year's most talked about horror movies. Fun fact, Bonnie Aarons, who brought to life The Nun, plays the vampire master in the film. Barbara Crampton has not stopped working, and while appearing in new projects such as the Fantastic Creepshow series, she continues to star in upcoming horror films that bridge comedy as well as commentary. Superhost takes on the social influencer craze as well as the darker side of Airbnb-type arrangements. It hit Shudder in September of last year. The upcoming rich-centric horror comedy King Knight, co-starring Matthew Gray Gubler and Ray Weiss, is directed by Richard Bates Jr. Barbara Crampton has continued to grow, not only as an actress, but an icon. Last year, she actually stepped into the likeness and shoes of some fellow horror icons for a pictorial called Divas of Darkness. This included her transforming into the Bride of Frankenstein, Wednesday Addams, and a shockingly clone-like Elvira. Barbara Crampton has not slowed down in the least and seems as ageless as a vampire should. She continues to make amazing films and has struck her mark deeply into the genre, producing, writing, and acting in roles that buck the conventional, although she does go to conventions, and shows us that women in horror can get just as bloody as everyone else, and look fantastic doing it. I am doing fantastic, Barbara. Oh my gosh, you look amazing. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today. I am so excited. So I saw Alone with You, and I have questions about that. I have questions about your career. I know I don't have you for very long, but wow, that movie and your performance, I had flashbacks to my own family.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Sorry.
So no, you were perfect. So first off, I want to ask you, because you've been working in this industry since the VHS boom and independent films coming out, really start and then when they really started taking off. Can you talk about the evolution of that and how it's helped you as an artist and other artists in the genre and in entertainment and all around?
I mean, I feel like I've been working with emerging filmmakers for my 40 years of my career, starting with Stuart Gordon. And I think that working in the horror genre, in independent cinema and horror cinema, there's a foundation of giving a director the license to make the movies that they want to make. It's independent, and you don't have a lot of executives breathing down your neck and telling you, we need this or we need that. It's not a studio movie. I mean, I've worked on a few studio movies, but not very many. So I've mostly worked with people that are forging their own way and trying to tell their own stories with their own voices and trying to sort of curate their own voices. So I feel like this is what I've been doing forever. And it's my pleasure and really my privilege to work for these filmmakers that are emerging and trying to find their voice. And some of them really do well, like Stuart Gordon. He forged his own way and told stories in the way that he wanted to, and he was recognized for it. And then we have Adam Wingard, who also did the same. And most of the people that were associated with that film have really gone on to have extraordinary careers, a lot of them. And many of those people that did really were very good filmmakers, very good storytellers, and had an authentic voice in telling their stories. And then, you move into today, and for the past 10 years, I've had the opportunity to work on a lot of different films with a lot of emerging filmmakers. And then I look at somebody like Brandon Christensen, who I worked on Superhost with, and he did Z and Stillborn. And I feel like he's one of those people, and, worked with Colin Minahan, who's also forging his own way. And then you come to people like Ricky Bates Jr., who I just did King Knight with, and Emily and Justin, who really are new people, right? And they're just starting out. And I was attracted to this project because a casting director who I trust suggested it to me. And Andrew Corkin was working on it as a producer, and I like the movies that he's done. And Theo James is his partner. And of course, he's a fantastic actor, has been in a lot of really cool movies. And I read the script for this and I thought, well, this has an authentic voice to it, the story. And when I read the script, I really didn't know where it was going. I knew what it was doing, but I didn't know where it was going and what was going to be the outcome, and what was at the center of this woman's unhappiness and unease and dread and sense of isolation and loss and fear. I didn't know where it came from, and where the story went was very surprising to me.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and so, I I take a chance with a lot of these people. I don't, I'm just not sure, but I felt like, especially with this script, I really liked the script. I liked the people that they had surrounded them with to help them make the film. And and I liked my character and really liked speaking with them. And I knew they were co-directing it together. And so it felt like a good project to do. And it's really been wonderful to see it out on the festival circuit and doing so well. And they're getting a lot of accolades for their work. And I think they're a wonderful dynamic duo with strong, authentic voices. So I think we'll be seeing more of them. Like
Oh
some of these other
yeah.
people I've worked with.
Well, and I loved with this film in particular, it was condensed to just one person on screen the entire time for the most part, and
Yeah.
one place, and being able to
Mm-hmm.
create a sense of dread and a sense of terror in a setting like that is pretty phenomenal and hard to
Yeah.
do. So
Right. Yeah.
bravo on that one.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they did a great job.
So my other question for you is, as a woman, you've been more, in the horror genre, you've been a great inspiration, kind of along the lines of Emily in this as well. You've produced films, you've made films, behind and in front of the camera. Can you talk about how the industry has changed for you over the years, and how one, and letting you tell the stories you want to tell? Like
Mhm.
probably my favorite film, I think you may have usurped, that you've done with Reanimator, with Jacob's wife.
Mhm.
I absolutely love that movie, and it was so great. Can you talk about how the evolution of women in the industry has been for you?
Mhm. Yeah, I think in the early part of my career, not just being a woman, but just being an actor, I think that most people, even directors, writers, editors, everybody stayed in their lane. You just did your one thing, Nobody asked my opinion on anything. I got cast in something, and I would just do my own part. But what I see now, and like some of the creators that we're talking about, they kind of do it all. Adam Wingard would we had a great cinematographer, Andrew Palermo, on Your Next, but there was times when he would grab the camera from him and say, "Let me film this right now. I'm seeing something that I want to do." And so Andrew would go, "Okay." And you know, Brandon Christensen is also somebody who learned how to do his own VFX, so that because he didn't have a lot of money to hire somebody, so he learned how to do his own. And then he put them in the movies that he's been a part of. And so I'm seeing a growth with just people doing all different kinds of things in terms of putting a piece together. Amy Simons was an actor in Your Next, but she went on to be a writer, and she directed a movie a couple of years ago. She made a lot of money from one project, and she said, "I'm just going to make my own movie. I'm going to fund it myself because I'm going to make it the way I want to make it." And now she's working on an Amazon show as a showrunner. And so,
Fantastic.
I mean, so we're all getting we all have the opportunities now because it's available to us to learn how to do everything. And that's kind of what I tell young filmmakers, male or female, just learn how to do it yourself and make movies with your friends. I mean, that's what a lot of people, I think the more successful people that are coming up in this way as an independent person and trying to get the attention of maybe the studios to get more money to make bigger projects, they're kind of doing it on their own. And as far as women in specific coming up, I do think that there's more opportunities than there ever have been for women, and we still have a long way to go. But there's definitely stories that are written with more female protagonists than ever before. It used to be skewed 75% male, 25% female, and now I think it's a little bit better. But I do think, you know, I wouldn't have been able to tell a story like Jacob's Wife, producing this myself, putting myself in as the star of the movie. It was kind of like my Rocky in a way,
Exactly.
I wouldn't have been able to do that as a woman probably 40 years ago when I started in the business, but now, because of the body of work that I've done, people were a little bit more open to me wanting to tell a story about a woman, that was sort of in a way similar to myself, and I do see more women and friends of mine like Axel Carolyn and Bria Grant being given opportunities to direct movies now, where I don't think they would have been able to. It would have been harder. It's been a man's world for a long time, and still in many ways it is. And we keep having to push our way in there and show up and do good work. And I think women are proving themselves to be just as capable as the men. And I think as soon as we can sort of forget those gender identities and just be recognized for the good work that we're doing, then that's just going to benefit us all. But I do think the playing field is much more level than it's ever been, and surprising to me, and I'm grateful for that.
It's amazing. And I'm so happy that you kind of just blown up again. And I love it. I love seeing you in projects. You're just one of my favorite horror goddesses, basically. By the way, your Elvira pictorial was you were like a clone.
So fun. So I'm such a fan of Cassandra, and I have a very good friend who's a makeup artist and a really great friend of mine who's been photographing me for 40 years, and they wanted to work on this project together, and they said, do you want to do this? And I said, oh my God, it would be such an honor to play all these iconic characters.
Great.
Through the years. Yeah.
So I know I'm about to lose you, but I had one question that kind of combines everything that you've been working on here. And that is, especially with Alone with You and with Jacob's Wife, I love using the horror genre as a metaphor for something more, something to talk to about things that may be uncomfortable or sneak in through the subconscious, what we're talking about. And with this film, I really loved how it talked to insecurity, isolation, self-doubt, and how it can eat us up alive. Can you talk about using the genre and the stories to kind of talk about these things like you did with this film and the others that you've done?
Well, the main component of a horror film that's really different from any other genre is fear and how we face our fears. And I think more than any other genre, I think the horror genre allows us to look fear right in the face. And you're either going to run from it, like people do in a lot of horror films, or you're going to face it and you're going to come out the other side. And the horror genre is really one that is about being as powerful as you can as a person and conquering your fears, but also having great empathy to understand why the world is like this. Why do we have these feelings? Why do we have these fears? Where does this come from? So in so many ways, it's the most base of all the human emotions that we have. And I don't know of any other genre that deals with that. And I've seen it over the pandemic, so much so. And if you're active on Twitter, you see how really destroyed and distraught people are.
Yeah.
And they walk around with that a lot, and it comes out every once in a while, and people talk about it, on Twitter. But we're walking around with that even without a pandemic most of the time. And we have to give people an outlet to be able to express that and to see themselves in other situations that they can say, oh, I see that person is struggling with the same kinds of things that I'm struggling with. If they can overcome it, maybe I can too. So, the horror genre is like a mirror for our own fears, and being able to tap into that and being able to understand it and empathize with it and being able to go on despite what's really happening. So yeah, so that's why I really love the horror genre more than any other genre.
Truth. Well, Barbara, thank you so much, and I am just so happy that you're continuing to work, and you came back to us and with your next, and it just thank you so much for doing Jessica. What you've done, and thank you again for setting this up. Okay, thank you, and I will talk to you hopefully soon.
Thank you. Okay, bye.
Thank you for watching our show. If you like what you see, please subscribe to our Joe Blow Videos channel. Tell your friends who like this sort of content and turn on the bell to receive notifications for all of our latest videos. We're an independent company and we appreciate all of your support. Amazing when an actor brings gravitas and respect to a genre like horror, which for a long time didn't get that much in the way of props and accolades. But there are artists who bring that respect with them to the world of fright films and not only have fun with it, but give performances that will make your hair stand on end. These artists bring with them a repertoire that can't be ignored, and today on What the Fuck Happened to Our Favorite Horror Stars, we're going to be showcasing one of the best and a guy who's more than just a doll face, Brad Dourif. Brad Dourif was born on March 18, 1950 in Huntington, West Virginia. His father passed away when Brad was only 3 years old, and his mother remarried a professional golfer named William Campbell. Dourif's family operated a dye business. Not that sort of dye, D-Y-E, named Standard Ultramarine and Color Company that thrived and did very well. It was started by his grandfather after he came to the U.S. from Europe. Brad dropped out of college to pursue acting in New York, and it was during his time as a stage actor that he would be seen by Milos Forman, and the beginning of his film career would begin in a massive way. Forman approached the young actor and offered him a role in the now classic One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Dourif would get the role of the ill-fated Billy Bibbit, who is truly the heart of the film. Produced by Michael Douglas, the film would go on to get nominated for multiple Academy Awards, with Brad Dourif being nominated for Best Supporting Actor, and the film taking home Best Director, Actor, Actress, Screenplay, and Film. Dourif would win the BAFTA and a Golden Globe for the movie. It would also give us one of the best acceptance speeches ever that included Brad Dourif and the rest of the cast when Jack Nicholson won multiple awards for Chinatown while he was filming One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. It was, as Nicholson stated, quite smashing. Brad would follow up Cuckoo's Nest with one of his first forays into the horror genre with the stylish and supernatural Eyes of Laura Mars. Dourif's character of Tommy Ludlow is one ball of nerves and is a standout in a film that has some heavy hitters in the cast, including Faye Dunaway, Tommy Lee Jones, and a very young Raul Julia. The story centers on Laura Mars, a photographer who begins seeing through the eyes of a serial killer as they murder their victims. Laura joins forces with the police to help solve the crimes and catch the killer, but things take a very unexpected turn. The film is a classic of the 70s, and you should truly try and check it out if you've never seen it. If for nothing else, to realize Tommy Lee Jones has never really changed in the span of nearly 50 years. Dourif would have a lead role in his next film, Wise Blood, directed by the legendary John Huston, who also appears in the film. Wise Blood is another of those movies that have an amazing cast, with Harry Dean Stanton and Ned Beatty alongside Dourif. It's also a hard film to categorize, as it's very much got some dark comedy going on, but it's also a satire and commentary on religion, and the times as Dourif's character, Hazel Motes, is a young war veteran that comes back to start his own religion that's against religion, as well as belief in there being such a thing as sin. Dourif's performance is riveting, and the film itself is a feast for the eyes. It's a twisted sort of Southern Gothic, which makes sense as it was based on the book of the same name that came out in 1952 by Flannery O'Connor, who specialized in that genre. Wise Blood went on to become one of John Huston's best films and is now a classic. Again, you should check it out. In 1984, Dourif would have his first film collaboration with another legend, David Lynch, with Dune. While the science fiction epic can be divisive when it comes to how well it represents Herbert's novel, there's no denying that Dourif's role as Piter the Mentat is one of the best things about the film. His delivery and performance as the twisted Mentat with the overt eyebrows and stained lips is one of the most memorable images from the movie, right along with Sting in his iron underwear. Dourif would follow up Dune with the role of Raymond in Lynch's classic weird noir, Blue Velvet. This would be yet another movie that would wind up on many lists of greatest movies of all time, and is considered one of Lynch's best films. 1984 would be the year, though, that would show the range of Brad Dourif and cement his status as a horror icon. That year, he'd co-star in Mississippi Burning, along with Gene Hackman and Willem Dafoe. The film would rake in awards and nominations about its story of a racially motivated murder set in the 1960s. That same year, Child's Play would be released, and the subgenre of the killer doll and horror would never be the same. Dourif would be the voice of Chucky, the possessed doll, and portray the non-plastic version of the fully named Charles Lee Ray. Created by Don Mancini, Tom Holland, and John LaFia, Child's Play gave full-on nightmares to those of us who always suspected dolls might be able to kill us in our sleep, or just, well, anytime. While Chucky was the stuff of nightmares, Child's Play also embraced the dark absurdity of the story. Even while we were terrified for Andy, we couldn't help but love Chucky. And apparently a lot of people loved the walking, cursing, killing good guy because the box office return was 4 times what the budget was. The success of Child's Play practically guaranteed a sequel, and 2 years later Dourif reprised the role in Child's Play 2. Also in 1990, Dourif would continue adding to his list of horror greats he had worked with by starring in the underrated Spontaneous Combustion, directed and written by Tobe Hooper. This time Brad would be the heroic lead of the film, which follows his character Sam as he discovers his pyrokinetic abilities that came from his parents taking part in nuclear testing. The experiment leaves his parents dead, but their newborn alive and seemingly normal, until his abilities manifest years later. But the power comes at a price, and every time Sam uses it, his body starts to deteriorate, burning from the inside out. 1990 was a busy year for Dourif at the theater. That same year, he would co-star in the Stephen King adaptation Graveyard Shift, where he would be on the losing end of some giant man-eating rats. He'd co-star opposite the great James Earl Jones in Grim Prairie Tales, one of those rare Western horror hybrids, which was also an anthology film. But probably the creepiest and most terrifying film Dourif did that year was the third entry into the Exorcist franchise with Exorcist III, which would also see William Peter Blatty, the man who wrote the original novel, write the screenplay and direct the film. It would also see the return of Father Karras, played by actor Jason Miller. Karras carries within him the demon, but also appears to be possessed by the spirit of the Gemini Killer, aka James Veneman, who Dourif portrays. Dourif's scenes opposite George C. Scott are terrifying. He truly brings forth the insanity and intensity of the Gemini, yet there are moments where Dourif is crying on screen while ranting, and you feel compassion for not only Karras, but also the twisted individual that the Gemini was and how he became that way. There are truly horrifying scenes throughout the film. You know the one. Many involved, including Dourif, were disappointed with the movie though, as the film had a lot of studio interference that changed much of what Blatty wanted to include. The entire exorcism climax was not part of the plan originally, but apparently the studio felt that a movie called The Exorcist III needed said exorcism. The Exorcist III, though, still holds up as a very effective horror film, and Brad Dourif gives a tour de force performance. 1991 would see once again Brad in not only some fun horror films, but also more highly pedigreed cinema with Jungle Fever by Spike Lee. The third Child's Play film would hit that year, as well as the body horror film Body Parts with Jeff Fahey as a fellow recipient of pieces from the body of Charlie Fletcher. 1992, Dourif would join the Critters universe in Critters 4. The following year, he'd add yet another name to that list of horror legends he'd worked with, as he co-starred in Dario Argento's Trauma, a giallo co-starring Piper Laurie and Asia Argento. In 1994, Dourif would star as a mad genius inventor of the killer in the title, Death Machine. I feel like Death Machine is one of those underrated films that deserves a lot more love. Set in the far future of 2003, ouch, my age. Death Machine is a cyberpunk horror hybrid that's filled with all sorts of nods that horror and sci-fi fans will pick up on. 3 of the characters are named Raimi, Yutani, and Wayland. Another character is named John Carpenter, while Richard Brake, who you will recognize from many a Rob Zombie horror flick later on, is Scott Ridley. The film is an unabashed love letter to flicks like Aliens and Terminator, with a healthy dose of gore and humor thrown in. In 1997, Dourif would become part of the actual Alien legacy with his obsessed, crazed scientist role of Dr. Gatoman in Alien Resurrection. In 1998, 7 years after his last appearance, Chucky would get lucky in Bride of Chucky. This film would truly embrace the camp and crazy of Chucky and would add the lovely and deadly Tiffany, played by Jennifer Tilly, to the mix. Yes, indeed, we get to see Chucky get lucky, and our virgin eyes would never be the same. Also in 98, Dourif would appear in Urban Legend, a massive hit and iconic part of the 90s horror slasher renaissance. It would also co-star fellow horror icon Robert Englund, and would again be filled with some in-jokes and references, making it a great pairing with Scream. In 2002, we'd see Dourif become part of another iconic film series, The Lord of the Rings, with his role of Grima Wormtongue, the evil and deceptive advisor of King Theoden. While not purely horror, Dourif's portrayal of the character is eek-inducing. He exudes a truly creepy and, dare I say, oily, greasy vibe. And honestly, if you haven't seen the original Lord of the Rings trilogy, there's something inherently wrong with your life, and you need to get it fixed right away. 2003 saw another addition to the Chucky family, with Seed of Chucky. In this film, the consequences of Tiffany and Chucky not thinking ahead about protection came to life in the form of Glenn, or Glinda, a nod to director Ed Wood, the child of Chucky, voiced by Billy Boyd. This film turns up the surreal and the meta of the Chucky universe and is the beginning of creator Don Mancini being in the director's chair and writing too. John Waters appears in it as a sleazy photographer who comes to a bad end. The film is strangely sweet with the relationship that Tiffany and her child have, though it's still a twisted flick on a lot of levels, of course. But Mancini created a queer icon yet again with Glinda, and the metaphor of being a trans child looking for acceptance is stitched into the story. Dourif would co-star in the remake of the gore and splatterfest Wizard of Gore in 2007, as well as become yet a part of another horror classic series with Halloween via Rob Zombie's remake as Sheriff Brackett. The following year, he'd return to the role in Zombies Halloween 2, as well as continue an ongoing partnership with Werner Herzog in the Nick Cage starring Bad Lieutenant 2, Port of Call, New Orleans. In 2013, Chucky became even more of a family affair as Curse of Chucky was released. This entry would be a special one as Dourif's daughter Fiona joined the cast as Nika, a paraplegic who lives in an isolated house. We learn that the then human Charles Lee Ray was weirdly in love, obsessed with Nika's mother Sarah, and kidnapped her while she was pregnant with her. Charles wanted to create a family unit with the unborn Nika and her sister Barb. Things don't go as planned, and the police arrive and Charles stabs Sarah in the stomach, causing the now paralysis Nika has. His escape from the police is what leads him to putting his soul into Chucky, and now he's back to collect on his past debts. Curse of Chucky brings together all the previous films in a fine return to form for the little guy, with Jennifer Tilly playing Jennifer Tilly possessed by Tiffany. Did you get that? And Alex Vincent returning as Andy Barkley. In 2017, Cult of Chucky would really expand that same universe, this time taking place in an insane asylum where Nika finds herself after the events of the previous film. Chucky slips into the facility and discovers his ability to implant his consciousness into multiple Chucky dolls at the same time. There's a lot going on in this film, and while there's a lot of humor and fan-freak moments, there's also a lot of darker aspects. Nika's therapist has been sexually assaulting her while she's under hypnosis. There is a patient who had murdered her own child, and you've also got Andy dealing with all the trauma he experienced while dealing with Chucky growing up. The trauma left in Chucky's wake is also shared by the returning Kyle from Child's Play 2, who shows up to taunt a restrained Chucky at Andy's home. Cult of Chucky continues Mancini's winning streak with bringing back the classic character and using the genre to talk about trauma and how it can literally haunt us and change us. It's also a sort of passing of the torch a bit, with Fiona Dourif taking over from Dad. In 2018, Dourif starred as Daddy in the Changeling Wild Child film Wilding, alongside his Lord of the Rings co-star Liv Tyler. It's a disturbing film, and Dourif's role is one of the most disturbing aspects, as he desperately tries to keep the young girl at the center of the story, always like a child and not maturing. His reasons for that become clear as she starts to become a creature of the woods, a wildling. While Brad Dourif's movie history is pretty impressive, he's also done a ton of television work as well. One of the first, and one that I remember even as a young girl who managed to see a lot of things she shouldn't have, was the ABC movie of the week, I Desire, about a female vampire preying on men who thought she was a lady of the night, which she was, but not the way they expected. It also co-starred David Naughton, who had been a creature of the night himself in American Werewolf in London the year prior. Dourif would appear in episodes of The X-Files, Tales from the Crypt, Millennium, The Hunger, Star Trek and Babylon 5, as well as appearing on the late Norm Macdonald sitcom The Norm Show as the Devil, of course. In Disney's Once Upon a Time series, he played the Dark One Zozo, whom Rumpelstiltskin kills to take his power. And while it may not be horror, I think we can all agree Deadwood pretty much ruled. But when it comes to television, the biggest thing to happen to horror in a while is the Sci-Fi Channel series, which is Dourif returning to the role of Chucky. And this is pretty historic when it comes to our all-time favorite slashers. The one only other time to have a series of films and a TV series starring the same actor in the role was Nightmare on Elm Street, which had Robert Englund playing Freddy in Freddy's Nightmares. Chucky is a bona fide hit, reuniting not only Dourif with the role, but being created by, produced, co-written, and directed by Don Mancini. It also has Jennifer Tilly returning to her iconic role of Tiffany, and Jennifer Tilly, Alex Vincent as Andy, and Christina Leese as Kyle. It also sees the return of Fiona Dourif as a now possessed by Chucky, Nika. The series continues on after the events of Cult of Chucky and introduces viewers to a number of new characters. The series has won a lot of accolades because of the representation of gay characters in the series.
You know, I have a queer kid.
You have a kid.
Gender fluid.
And you're cool with it.
I'm not a monster, Jake.
Creator Don Mancini is openly gay and truly put a lot of his own experience growing up within the series, with the lead character Jake. It's uncanny how much photos of young Mancini look like actor Zachary Arthur, actually. There are a number of flashbacks in the show that follow the life of Charles Lee Ray before he becomes Chucky in different stages of his life, but perhaps the most epic of these happen when Fiona Dourif actually gets transformed into a younger version of her own father playing the role. It's simply awesome. Passing the torch indeed. Thanks to the success of Chucky, a second season has been ordered by Sci-Fi USA Networks and will be coming to the small screen later this year. Brad Dourif's already legendary body of work just keeps growing, and the man himself shows no signs of stopping when it comes to his work. Brad Dourif is one of those actors who I know will show up eventually in something that I love. He brings a unique quality to every role he does and makes every one of them memorable. No matter the film or the role, he gives it his all and enjoys it. I can't think of a better way to represent that than the fact that while filming Lord of the Rings, all the British actors thought he was actually British, as he kept his accent throughout filming, never losing it. That dedication and talent makes him not only one of our favorite legends of horror, but a legend of films, period. Horror films hit the mainstream pop culture world with a bang in the 80s. Before then, the genre was really more of a special club, which it still is, but in the 80s was when things seemed to explode. We've talked before about how VHS and cable TV helped create the wave of 80s horror, the likes of which had never been seen before. That decade gave us the rise of icons, one of the new pantheon of horror specifically that came out of that decade and rose head and shoulders and glove above the rest. Freddy Krueger became a global phenomenon when he rose out of the world of dreams, or should I say nightmares, when Nightmare on Elm Street hit theaters in 1984, and he would continue to rule the decade, as well as continue to be one of the reigning kings of horror to this day. Freddy would start out as the darkest of the dark when it came to his story and character, but would evolve into a wisecracking villain whose personality was as big a draw as the special effects that were a part of every Nightmare film. And the only way something like that could occur in such an evolutionary way would be the man behind the burns just being that damn charming and likable. How do you make a character like Freddy Krueger become the stuff of plushies and posters, of water squirters and kids' toys, when kids were the very thing he started off slaughtering? How the hell does that even happen? Well, it happens when Robert Englund is the guy in the sweater and fedora, relishing every minute of screen time and one-liner with panache. Robert Englund would go on to become this generation's Vincent Price, the erudite character within the horror genre. Robert Englund would go beyond Freddy Krueger into a realm all his own. He'd create new characters, homage others, and would do so while creating a rabid fan base that's got multiple generations within it. On this episode of What the Fuck Happened to This Horror Star, we're meeting the man of your dreams as we find out what the fuck happened to Robert Englund. Robert Englund was born in 1947, a native Californian. He grew up loving to surf and would start finding his love of acting early on in life. Eventually, Englund would wind up becoming a seasoned theater actor and would perform Shakespeare on the stage before becoming a working film and TV actor. One of Englund's first horror roles was one of his first film roles, with the part of Buck in Tobe Hooper's Eaten Alive in 1976, the Killer Croc movie where he meets a nasty end. The same year he was eaten by a croc, Englund would get punched in the nose by Chris Christopherson in the remake of A Star is Born. Yes, the movie with Lady Gaga wasn't the first version of this story, far from it. Englund worked steadily through the 70s and 80s, doing both TV and features. At one point, Englund read for the role of Han Solo in a little movie called Star Wars. While he didn't get that part, or the part of Luke Skywalker, he had a buddy named Mark, who he thought would be great as the farm boy from a galaxy far, far away. Englund told Mark Hamill about the auditions, and the rest, as they say, is history. So yes, Star Wars fans, you should thank Robert Englund for your favorite Jedi. In 1981, he'd journey into the horror genre again with Dead and Buried, the creepy town with a dark secret film that was co-written by Alien scribe Dan O'Bannon. He'd also co-star in Galaxy of Terror, the Roger Corman-produced horror and science fiction film that was actually capitalizing on Alien's success. This cult classic would pair him with the late great Sid Haig and feature one of the most infamous worm scenes of all time. While doing various TV shows like Chips, Heart to Heart, and even Charlie's Angels, it would be in 1983 when Englund would hit pay dirt with the small screen as part of the television event V. Kids today won't realize what a moment V was for those of us who didn't have VCRs or bingeable streaming. The miniseries created by Kenneth Johnson was amazing. Fantastic actors and characters, as well as a retelling warning of what happened with the Nazis in World War II. The metaphor was a major and portrayed well aspect of what went down during that time. People who became sympathizers to protect themselves or to benefit from what was happening, freedom fighters, the lie beneath the smile, and the literal devouring of an entire race. But it also showed characters like Englund's sweet and kind Willie, the visitor who was actually sent to the wrong place. Willie was a translator who had been sent to the wrong country, which is why he wasn't the best with English. Willie would wind up falling in love with a human woman named Harmony and would become one of the first of the aliens to be shown not only as the reptilian race they were, but also becoming one of the first to change sides and fight with the humans against the invasion. Willie would become a fan favorite thanks to Englund's performance and likable portrayal of a soldier who never really wanted to fight and who saw the wrong of what was happening around him. This would be the case of many Germans who defied the Nazis during the war and who would help many escape the atrocities happening around them. Willie would become a hero, and his tragic story with Harmony would be one of the standouts of the V saga. But it would be the following year that the role of a lifetime would come to Robert Englund, and funnily enough, he wasn't the first choice. Wes Craven's creation of Freddy Krueger was originally going to be played by villain extraordinaire David Warner, but Englund would get the part. Nightmare on Elm Street would launch a film series that became one of the greatest in the horror genre and would cement Englund as one of film's greatest villains and monsters. It would be the complete opposite of his role on V, and handily for Englund, the role had him under a lot of prosthetics, which meant he wasn't readily recognizable when walking down the street. It also meant he could get other roles not of the horror baddie variety, which he continued to do on television as well as in film. Englund would become Freddy 4 more times on the big screen in the 80s alone, and would continue working on TV with the regular series of V, the single-season series of Downtown opposite Michael Nouri, and even Knight Rider. But he'd also take Freddy from the big to small screen in the historic move of having Freddy get his own TV series, Freddy's Nightmares, in 1988. No other big screen boogeyman would have that happen until 2 years ago, when Chucky made the leap. Freddy's Nightmares was an anthology series which had Freddy as your host, who would sometimes play a part in the freaky tales being told. The first episode actually focused on Freddy's trial pre-burn and was the story of how he became what he was. As he says at the beginning of this episode, this was his nightmare. During this time, Englund would take a stab at directing with 976 Evil in 1988. The satanic phone line film, which stars Evil Ed himself, Stephen Jeffries, plays the lonely teenager who gets possessed by the demonic entity that preys on the phone line. In 1989, England would go classic with the horror in one of my favorite adaptations of Phantom of the Opera. This version would have the Phantom, named Eric Dessler, make a deal with the devil. This would be the cause of his facial deformity, the price of creating beautiful music that will be the only thing he would ever be loved for. Eric finds an inventive way to fix his face, not with the typical mask, but by using other skin to patch his back together, as well as makeup and wigs. Phantom also had the inventive use of time travel for Christine, played by Jill Sholin, to be brought back to her Phantom. The film would also co-star Bill Nighy and Alex Hyde-White. Phantom of the Opera would really play up the fact that England was well known for Freddy Krueger, with the movie poster proclaiming, "Robert Englund was Freddy, now he's the Phantom of the Opera, an all-new nightmare." While this didn't tread into copyright infringement for New Line, it detracted from the fact that Englund was playing a completely different sort of character, albeit still a bloody and murderous one. Phantom gave Englund a chance to play the romantic angle, and he did a fantastic job of it. He was brutal, creepy, seductive, and tragic.
You made it all possible, Christine. Now, it's just a matter of what you choose. Love or music.
At one time, there was a plan to do a sequel where Eric finds himself enamored with a blind singer in present day, as the film does leave it open for one. But sadly, that never came to pass. The 90s continued Freddy's reign at the box office, but before the final nightmare, Englund would star as the leather-clad tough Smiley in the now cult classic, at the time not so much, Andrew Dice Clay vehicle, The Adventures of Ford Fairlane. Final Nightmare would arrive a year later in 91 and would bring Freddy into the realm of 3D and show the killer's violent beginnings, with Alice Cooper starring as Freddy's father. Freddy's Dead: The Final Nightmare was quite the family affair, as we also meet Freddy's daughter and get to see Englund out of the makeup. In 1992, Wes Craven would join forces with Englund again with the aptly named Nightmare Cafe on NBC. The series had Englund as Blackie, the mysterious and otherworldly proprietor of said cafe. The cafe was sort of a crossroads for lost souls. The show was sort of a Twilight Zone meets X-Files, with Blackie directing Frank and Faye, his two employees, as they helped the patrons of the cafe figure out their troubles as a way of redeeming themselves too. Nightmare Cafe was a fantastic series, but sadly NBC canceled it after only 6 episodes. That same year, Englund would star in a sort of dual role in Danse Macabre, which carried a strong Phantom of the Opera vibe. This story, though, was set within the world of the ballet, with Englund playing Anthony, the dance teacher who becomes obsessed with his student. Meanwhile, murders are happening around the ballet. This similarity to Phantom of the Opera isn't a surprise, as the film was originally supposed to be a sort of sequel to that movie, but that connection was removed. In '93, Englund starred as the Marquis de Sade and his descendant Paul in Tobe Hooper's Night Terrors. The film is a rather strange one, which focuses on a cult that follows the writings of de Sade. In 1994, Englund returned as a new sort of Freddy Krueger with New Nightmare, perhaps one of the most meta horror movies ever made, and what I would consider one of the smartest. Wes Craven managed to bring new life to the nightmare with this entry, which is set in a pseudo version of reality, with everyone playing versions of themselves and Freddy Krueger being an entity of evil. Englund plays himself and this new Uber Freddy. In 1995, Robert would join forces with Tobe Hooper again with The Mangler, perhaps one of the most bizarre Stephen King adaptations ever made. Englund plays the gross and handicapped owner of said Mangler, a laundry press machine that's possessed with evil and kills people. It's just as weird as that sentence sounds, and Englund delivers the sort of scenery-chewing performance this movie needed, and somehow it got not one, but 2 sequels. In 1997, Englund joined some of his fellow horror icons in Wishmaster, which would be produced by Wes Craven. The Killer Genie film is now a modern classic thanks to the creation of the Djinn as a great bad guy and the insane amount of horror legends in one flick. Besides Englund was Kane Hodder, Tony Todd, Reggie Bannister, Joe Pilato, and Angus Scrimm as the narrator. Thanks to the success of Wes Craven's Scream in 1996, slasher films got a new lease on life, or death, I suppose. In 1998, Urban Legend hit screens with England playing college professor William Wexler. Urban Legend was a neat mix of the Scream level of smart and savvy horror, but also incorporated the urban legend myths we'd all grown up with. It was also another of those films that brought together icons of horror, with England being joined in the film by Brad Dourif and Danielle Harris. That same year, England starred in a rather amusing bit of casting in Dee Snider's Strangeland, where he played one of the angry mob against the release of Snyder's terrifying Captain Howdy after being cured of his insanity. This, of course, doesn't last long. It would be in 2001, though, that England would don the fedora and sweater one more time for the throwdown horror fans had been waiting for with Freddy vs. Jason. The film was a massive hit and was the culmination of a promised meeting of the monsters. In 2005, Tim Sullivan would cast England as Mayor Buckman in the remake of Herschel Gordon Lewis's classic splatterfest 2000 Maniacs, named 2001 Maniacs. The ghost cannibal flick was a skewering of racism and insanity. It would also pair England once again with the awesome Lin Shaye. 2006 would see Robert appear, albeit briefly, in the Adam Green masterpiece Hatchet, which would star in a dual role his buddy Kane Hodder. That same year, Robert Englund would switch sides from the slasher to the man trying to stop the killer in the fantastic Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon. If you haven't seen Behind the Mask, you've sold yourself very short and need to rectify that immediately. The film is a faux documentary that takes on the tropes of the classic slasher and the mythos that surrounds them as we watch Leslie Vernon, a seemingly sweet and good-natured man who is getting ready for his first night of murdering and slashing. In this universe, it would seem that, at least to Leslie, killers like himself and Freddy and Jason, etc., have a purpose of keeping the balance to things. Leslie is followed around by a documentary crew who eventually realize this is serious, but by then it is too late. Robert plays Doc Halloran, the sort of Sam Loomis / Donald Pleasance of the film, to Leslie's Michael Myers.
What's he calling himself now? Leslie Vernon? How perfect.
I honestly can't say enough good about this movie, which also stars the late great Scott Wilson in a fantastic role as a retired serial killer. England would appear in a number of horror films in the following years, as well as more television work, including adding his voice to the Batman animated series as the Riddler, as well as Justice League as Felix Faust. On the Marvel side, he'd appear in Spectacular Spider-Man as the Vulture, and the Superhero Squad show as Dormammu, just to name a few. FearNet would be the home to Robert Greenhall's web series Fear Clinic in 2009, which would bring Kane Hodder and England back together with Danielle Harris and Lisa Wilcox as well. The concept is a neat one, with England playing Dr. Andover, a doctor who has lost his license and who is obsessed with curing people of their fears. Hodder plays Villatoro, his very large assistant, who helps him to provide his quote-unquote treatments. Hall would return to the story a few years later with a feature film starring England and Fiona Dourif. The land of video games was also no stranger to England, who lent not only his voice, but likeness to a number of them. Freddy Krueger would become part of the Mortal Kombat universe in 2011. That same year, England would play a version of himself in Call of Duty Black Ops, with perhaps one of the most epic zombie add-ons of all time. England was part of a massive celebrity-filled campaign, which co-starred Sarah Michelle Gellar, Danny Trejo, and Michael Rooker, all playing themselves, and Papa George himself, George Romero, also playing himself. In 2017, England would add to his DC repertoire with Injustice 2, where he voiced the nightmare-creating Scarecrow. Perfect casting, if you ask me.
We both use fear as a weapon.
Robert Englund embraced the genre that loves him wholeheartedly, continuing to work within it and not limiting himself to just horror either in both film and television. He stepped back into the role of Freddy Krueger once again for the first time since Freddy vs. Jason in the Goldbergs episode Mr. Knifey Hands in 2018. In 2019, Robert Englund joined his Nightmare on Elm Street 2 co-star Mark Patton for Patton's documentary Scream Queen, My Nightmare on Elm Street, which spoke about Patton's journey as a gay man in Hollywood and how Freddy's Revenge was one of the more gay horror films of the 80s and has since become embraced by the gay community. It's a side of the story you may not have heard, and is a look behind a curtain not normally seen. In 2020, he hosted the docuseries True Terror with Robert Englund for the Travel Channel, a series that looks at horrifying true stories throughout history. That same year, he lent his voice to J.J. Villard's Fairy Tales for Adult Swim, a gross and star-filled retelling of classic fairy tales that had a number of other horror stars on board, including Doug Bradley, John Kasser, Linda Blair, and Cassandra Peterson, just to name a few. 2022 would see Englund bringing full circle his horror fame with his appearance as the tragic Victor Creel in the 4th season of Stranger Things. Without going into spoiler territory for those of you who haven't seen it yet, what the hell is wrong with you? Go watch it! This season is steeped in nods and homages to Nightmare on Elm Street, not the least of which is one of the show's heroines is named Nancy. It's tailor-made for fans of horror, and especially Nightmare on Elm Street, and having Englund play the role he does is absolutely perfect. Robert Englund is a living legend to horror fans and film fans around the world, and he loves the fans right back, appearing at numerous conventions around the globe. He's a fantastic storyteller at the shows and gives a great experience to every fan. He'll talk your ear off, or maybe cut it off, but it's always a great time. One thing he really loves is seeing all of the ink that fans have gotten over the years. Englund's website, robertenglund.com, has an entire gallery dedicated to fan tattoos, as well as convention appearances with fan photos on display. Speaking of conventions, we've got a special treat for you on this episode of What the Fuck Happened to Our Favorite Horror Celebrity. HorrorHound Weekend is a fan event that happens twice a year, or did until COVID happened a couple of years ago. Due to that, HorrorHound Weekend went virtual, and Robert Englund, who was to appear at that show, did an exclusive interview for the virtual con only for ticket holders. HorrorHound Weekend has given us the gift of that interview for this Robert Englund dedicated episode, so for the first time, fans who didn't get the chance to hear or see our favorite Dreamstalker chat about his life and career get to now. And be sure to check out HorrorHoundWeekend.com as the in-person event is happening in September 2022, the 9th through the 11th in Cincinnati, Ohio. So without further ado, here's the legend himself, Robert Englund, and yours truly. And I suppose I'll leave you to it with an Elvira quote that's appropriate. Unpleasant dreams.
Well, I have a lot of questions for you, sir, and I know we have some fan questions as well. But I'm going to start at the beginning, which is, you started as a theater actor. What made you want to get into acting as a child? And can you talk about working on the stage in the earlier days?
Well, I think it traces back, of all things, a combination of seeing the Mary Martin Broadway Peter Pan with the great Cyril Ritchard playing Captain Hook. And then I also saw the Disney cartoon at the famous theater on Hollywood Boulevard, Grauman's Chinese Theater, with my family and my cousins. And then right after that, I saw 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, another Disney film. And I went to Disneyland the opening week, and they actually had in Disneyland the cutaway of the Nautilus and all the costumes and all the props from 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Kirk Douglas singing, "I've got a whale of a tale to tell you, lads," and Kirk Douglas's costume. And the window of the Nautilus was like one of those kaleidoscopes you look into that have that design inside them with all the colors, and it opened up like a giant eye, and you looked out of it and you saw the giant squid. Now, this is Disneyland. I'm 7 years old. I'm there first week, and it was this entree into the world of make-believe and how they did it. And actually that ride, or that, whatever you want to call it,
experience.
What's the word I'm looking for here? Because it wasn't really a ride, but that exhibit of the Nautilus from 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea actually eventually became the submarine ride. And everybody that's been to Disneyland knows what I'm talking about. But when the window opened, you saw with the lighting and with the hidden monofilament wires, the giant squid tentacles and the seaweed. And you believed that giant squid, with his little beak was going to get you. And his eyes blinked, and it was like early animatronic. And then I went on the Peter Pan ride in Fantasyland. And you get in a little boat, and it actually flew over a ratio mock-up of the London skyline. And I think that those two childhood events really sort of set the flame inside me for wanting to be part of that world of fantasy and make-believe. And even as a child, I knew how good James Mason was as Captain Nemo. And my mother loved him. And my parents would take me to a lot of adult films in those days. And adult films doesn't mean pornography or nudity. Adult films then just meant films for grown-ups, right, as opposed to the kiddie matinee of Old Yeller, and The Parent Trap with Haley Mills. And I would go to see Jimmy Stewart movies and Marlon Brando movies as a small child with my parents. And I also, I had questions, and there were some themes that may have been disturbing, or there may have been a sequence that was a little too violent for little Robbie England, but my mother and father would explain it to me and explain the cause and effect of violence, and tell me what things meant. But I knew as a 7 or 8 year old that James Dean was special in East of Eden, or Marlon Brando was special in On the Waterfront. And James Mason was I could tell, I just knew. So that's probably the very, very beginning for me. And then later, my mother's best friend, her daughter was considered one of the most beautiful girls in Southern California. And she was a year older than me. But because I had known her since childhood, as I was entering middle school, junior high school, we called it back then, the age of 12 and a half or 13, she sort of had to chaperone me around like a big sister. But her mother, my mother's best friend, also liked that because she thought that beautiful Stephanie couldn't get into very much trouble if she had this little Robbie England tagging around with all the older boys who were hovering around her like bees around honey. She was a wannabe actress. And she went to a professional children's theater one year, and I sort of tagged along. I don't remember auditioning. I had seen a production there the year before, but I tagged along thinking that perhaps I would just be building scenery and I would be an usher, with a flashlight, sitting people in the audience. Well, somehow I did audition once I was there. She was the one that wanted to be in movies and on the stage. And I auditioned, and I got all the starring roles. I was Peter Pan, I was Aladdin, I was Pinocchio, I Hansel in Hansel and Gretel. And at some point in that summer, full of pre-adolescent hormones, I sort of was responding to early star power because I was starring in all these productions, even though the girls around me and the boys around me were 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 years old. And I was 12 and a half going on 13. And I remember sitting in the girls' bathroom, and all the girls were putting glitter from those tubes of glitter on their old-fashioned brasiers, the Maidenform living bra. They were all putting the glitter on there because that was going to be the glittering top of their costume as harem girls. They were the harem girls, right, in Aladdin, and I was Aladdin. And my hair had been dyed black, and my hair was very long for the time. This would have been probably 1959, maybe 1960. And my hair was in curlers. The girls used to curl their hair to make their hair bouffant in those days because I was supposed to have black curly hair because I was playing Aladdin. And I was sitting there with these things, I think they were called spoolies, these round things that made your hair curly. And I had curly hair to begin with, so, I sort of had a kind of a afro, I guess, when this was all done. And I had maiden form living bra boob in this ear, a maiden form living bra in this ear, and the girls were doing my hair and playing with my hair, and we were listening to I think it was West Side Story on a record player in the girls' bathroom with all that great echo and intermittent rock and roll from the radio station, and the girls were smoking because teenagers smoked back then. It was the cool thing to do. And the girls were teaching me how to blow smoke rings.
At 12.
And I'm 12 and a half. It's going to be my 13th summer.
Uh-huh.
And I'm right on the cusp of adolescence. And in those days, people didn't want to be artists or actors or dancers. You were supposed to be an engineer or a doctor or a lawyer. And I was fast-tracked to be a lawyer. And I remember sitting there and thinking, this acting stuff, I don't know, this isn't so sissy after all. And shortly thereafter, I went to my first really cool actors cast party with the older kids.
Uh-oh.
And remember, now I'm not old enough to drive, but some of them have cars. So I'm driving with 16-year-old teenage girls smoking cigarettes, and I'm in the back seat between two of them. And I'm going into the Hollywood Hills to a party where the parents are out of town, and they're playing rock and roll and Broadway songs, and somebody's gotten into mom and dad's cocktail kit and the liquor cabinet, and there's girls in bikinis, actresses floating on rafts in the swimming pool at night with the swimming pool light on, and everybody's older than me, and there's dancing, and a couple of people are drinking beer. But I didn't go to a party that good probably until I was in college. So I kind of knew that there was this other world besides the world of jocks that I knew from Little League and from surfing and from being a champion swimmer. There was this other world, the drama kids, It was like sort of being dropped down into the movie Fame, or the TV series Fame.
So you
a little bit of Glee tossed in for seasoning.
You learned the truth about the...
But the thing is, Jessica, I was schizophrenic because I was also the jock. I was, catcher on the Little League team, and I was swimming champion at the big swimming school, and I was taking diving lessons from an Olympic diving champ, and I was just starting to learn how to surf. And so it was this real kind of schizophrenic world for me back then. But obviously I liked it enough that I stuck with it.
That's fantastic. So you learned the truth that the drama geeks aren't as geeky as people make them out to be, is what it sounds.
Here's my best example of that. And it's a statistical example. Later on, when I'm in high school, and I still have this balance, being the surfer, popular guy, sidekick, wingman to some of the coolest guys in high school. And then my secret life as an actor and starring in the drama department productions. And I remember going back to back. I went to a party with my friends in the football team and the baseball team and the surf club. And there was 20 guys for every girl at this party. And a lot of guys getting obnoxiously drunk on kegs. Friends of mine, guys I loved, great guys with Woodies, surfing cars. And one guy wore a top hat. He was sort of like the John Belushi guy, and he drove a hearse. This is
that's fantastic.
Back in the surfing days.
Yeah.
We're talking 1962, 63 now. And the next week, I went to the drama department party. And it was 10 girls to one guy. And they were all these secret, beautiful girls that you would see on campus. But they weren't cheerleaders, and they weren't the surfer girls. But they were these mysterious girls that wore Burberry trench coats and had chopsticks in their bun Some of them wore glasses, but they were tall, like Nicole Kidman. But because they were tall, boys were afraid to ask them out, even though they were beautiful. And they were all at this party, and they were girls that you'd walk by in the corridors of school, or see 4 lockers down from you that were mysterious. And I knew at that party that something was up, because there was way more going on at that party. The music was better. The rock and roll was better. People weren't drinking out of a keg. There was literally we didn't say it, this was don't tell, don't ask time in America. But like one of the gay guys from the drama club was mixing cocktails, Parents were out of town.
I'm noticing a theme.
It's a theme. It's a recurring theme in Southern California. Hey, Rick. Andy's parents are in Tahoe. Party.
Well, kind of jumping off of that, you've done Shakespeare. You've done all of this beautiful work. It seems like a lot of stories kind of harken back to him, like drama stories. As an actor, though, which writer really seems to resonate with you? Is it Shakespeare? Is there a specific writer that really kind of hits you home?
Shakespeare is, I did Shakespeare in revolving repertory, which means that I was doing a different show on Saturday than I was doing on Friday, and a different show on Sunday.
Oh, wow. We
had rehearsed, it starts out and you're just doing one show and you're rehearsing the other, and then you get 2 shows up, and then you're rehearsing the third show. Then the third show, there's a point in the season where you're doing like 4 shows in revolving repertory, which is really a trick. And it's really hard. It keeps you on your toes, but it's also a real test for an actor. And it's a test for an actor to make sense out of the poetry, and to fight the rhyme, and to realize that Shakespeare is like thinking out loud. That's the trick to doing Shakespeare. You're thinking out loud. And so that really stretches you as an actor. But I was almost exclusively comedy in Shakespeare. I had a couple of dramatic roles, and I understudied Iago in Othello, but I was almost primarily doing comedy. I did a George Bernard Shaw play once, and I had a great learning experience in that. I was playing I had a twin sister in the production. Shaw had taken on this play as a bet that he could make a romantic hero out of a dentist. Uncool. Again, kind of a nerdy thing, the dentist. And he made a romantic hero out of a dentist. It's a very pro-feminist play, but also satirizing suffragettes a bit. And I played one of the twins, not identical twins, but one of the twins, a boy and a girl, of the so-called the mother, the suffragette. And I had an entrance in the third act, and the people on stage had been talking about my sister and I, the twins. And we'd rehearsed this, and we knew we had other laughs in the show, and we knew when to be cute, and we had some shtick here and there, and we knew where the satire was, and we came in on opening night into the third act entrance where they'd been talking about us before we entered, and we got like a 5-minute laugh, and it was this huge lesson about when other characters talk about your character in a play, or when the setup, how great the setup can be from a writer of the genius of George Bernard Shaw. And we never knew it. We never realized we had that huge laugh in rehearsals. It's just an accumulative laugh from the setup that begins the moment the curtain opens at the beginning of the play, and things are said about us and what we represent symbolically, and also in terms of our character and the menu, the recipe of the production, the play, and the story. And that was a great, great lesson for me. I remember the first time we got that laugh. The girl, the actress played my twin, Brenda. I remember we were off stage. We couldn't believe it. We talked about it all. We went out and had drinks that night and tried to figure out, and we figured it all out, why we got this great laugh that we had not anticipated. So that's the wonderful thing that you learn about structure and dramaturgy from doing plays by Moliere or George Bernard Shaw or Shakespeare and others. You figure that out, Chekhov. You start to figure that stuff out. It's difficult in regular week in, week out guest starring roles on television, because especially when I began back in the 70s, television wasn't the writing that it is today. Occasional shows were, but today the writing's much better. And I had to learn, even to get comfortable enough and the courage enough in movies and TV to improvise a little bit. And because I'm English trained at the Royal Academy branch in America, at the Meadowbrook Theater, the way the English train you is your first allegiance is to serve the author, the playwright, the screenwriter, then the director, and then yourself. In America, there's kind of a pressure to serve your own sense of truth first. Mm-hmm. And that's important. But when you know tone and style, you learn that there's different kinds of truth and different kinds of reality. The reality of a soap opera is different than the reality of The Wire, which is different from the reality of Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, which is different from the reality, of a Stephen King melodrama, or the difference between the reality of sort of kitchen sink realism that you might choose in a movie like Alien, as opposed to other shows where you might have a little more fun with them, like Star Wars. You have to play just a tad more heroic. It has a bit of that mythic Game of Thrones part of the tone. So you kind of learn that. That's one of the great things you learn by kind of serving writing first, looking for that style and tone.
And so, like, each writer kind of helps you grow your repertoire too. And
you learn to kind of recognize that style. Every show is a little different. Some shows are absolute naturalism. And you're always looking for truth. But as I said a minute ago, there's different kinds of truth. You're still playing the truth and the agenda of your character in a scene, but you also have to do a bit of a nod to style and tone as well.
Gotcha. That's a wonderful answer. So, I know I'm kind of hopping over to the horror realm now, because I know that, looking at your room and what you're just a legend and an icon in this genre.
Over my shoulder here.
I know, it's beautiful.
There's an original Karloff next to it there.
Oh my gosh.
Famous Canadian portraiture artist in the photography world, Josef Karsh. Those are a couple of my prized possessions.
Oh, that is fantastic.
A picture of Muhammad Ali above the lamp there. And that you can barely see a picture of me in a straw hat from a famous 70s TV movie I did. But the postcard that's stuck in the corner of that, it's up right there.
I see it.
That's a postcard of Lillian Gish, because I got to work with Lillian Gish from the silent movies in that film, along with Oscar-winning Jack Warden and Richard Thomas from, of course, from the Waltons. But I worked with Lillian Gish. I had a couple of scenes that I was in with Lillian Gish, and that's sort of my 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon that I have with silent movies. Because I've worked with Lillian Gish, I connect all the way back now to Charlie Chaplin.
Charlie Chaplin, yeah.
And everyone, yeah.
That's amazing. Well, and I know you've talked a lot about Freddie in your life, but we talked about just now, you had done a lot of comedy in your theatrical plays, but also in a lot of the work that you've done. Just prior to Freddie coming along, you were in V, playing the very innocent, sweet, wide-eyed little alien, Willie. Can you talk about why you went for Freddie, and were you concerned both yourself and were you right for the part? Because it was such a departure from what so many people knew you as, but you were so good, obviously.
Well, V, traditional audition, Phyllis Huffman, I knew her late husband, David, a wonderful actor, starred in that Stallone movie, Fist. If you're familiar with that, you know who David is. Phyllis brought me in for V, and I was known at Warner Brothers. I'd done a lot of work at Warner Brothers by then, and I think I'd been back for maybe at least a half a dozen callbacks on Dukes of Hazzard, and I'd guest starred on shows on the lot and done some movies there. And I was on the back lot. They waved me on. I got to drive onto the back lot and park on the back lot. And I was way in the back by the New York City streets scenery. And I went in, and I knew who Kenneth Johnson was, Incredible Hulk and $6 billion man and all of that. And I went in, and I just didn't have a clue because it was an alien. And I said, I said, Ken, I'm not sure what you want here. Help me. And he said, this is like one of the best. I like cut to the chase, no BS direction. And Ken said simply, he goes, 2 words. And I listened, and he said, Gene Wilder.
Oh.
And so Robert Englund, with my curly fro, I knew what he meant. I knew about that kind of hesitant delivery, that shyness that kind of pervades a Gene's work, and the vulnerability. So I began by channeling those, and then the malaprop. Willie was a malaprop. Willie was trained, I believe, to go to, in those days, I think they referred to it as Arabia, but he was, somewhere in the Middle East he was supposed to go. So he knew Arabic. He was inside his lizard brain. Willie was translating from his lizard language, if you remember the kind of cuneiform writing on the hats and on our emblems. He was translating from his native planet language to Arabic and then to English, because somehow Willie wound up in LA. Central casting, I think. So anyway, so Willie had this hesitancy because of that. And also the malaprop was his joke. It was his running gag, he didn't like to eat the mousies that everybody else ate. But he would be translating, and instead of getting to the word vegetarian, which he was trying to get to, as he had a little brain fart, Willie would say something like, oh, no, I don't want a mousie. I'm a veterinarian. And so I got a lot of, I figured that out, that was part of why I was there in the show. I was the lovable good alien, with a heart of gold, and I was funny, and I had to be a bit of a comedy relief. But very early on, for some reason, I got a ton of fan mail, as much as anybody on the show, if not more, from older women. And when I say older women now, I'm talking about people in their 30s. But they wanted to mother me. Oh. There was this, they just thought I think they related to me like a teddy bear, on a teenage girl's bed. And that you win at the fair or something. But I got so much fan mail. Then they started giving me girlfriends, and stuff. And towards the end of the show, I was developing a crush on the Star Child. And I think had the show continued, I think Jennifer Cook, the Star Child, I think she would have gone over to the dark side. And I think we were going to recruit Lydia, the blonde alien Queen Bee, played by June Chadwick. I think we were going to recruit her to the Resistance. So there was going to be a kind of switch there. I think that's sort of where the Bible of the show was going before we got canceled.
Oh man, that would have been fantastic. I loved her.
Fun. It was a hit show. It was an expensive show, and we had one of the top special effects people in the world, John Dykstra from Star Wars, working on our show. And we had a large cast, and I think it was a little intimidating but we had great ratings. And I think, as I remember, I think I met at a charity, network charity dinner or something, 6 months or so later. I met Brandon Tartikoff again. I'd met him before, and I think he said to me something like, "We made a mistake," because NBC, they hadn't really, or they weren't cognizant of just how huge the show was overseas.
Mm-hmm.
Huge in Europe, and also Australia, and also Asia. And they hadn't really crunched those numbers and realized what that meant, in terms of advertising and syndicated future show at that time. And maybe they would have kept us on had they sort of embraced that statistical knowledge.
I love that show so much. I'm going to bring in a fan question here because we just talked about V from Matt Lufsey. And he was asking, what was your favorite memory or moment from V or V the Final Battle?
Well, Matt, I was on one of the miniseries before the series. I remember we'd been up for 24 hours practically. And I was in a morgue somewhere in Los Angeles. And we were just sitting in this morgue waiting to work. And I was with Andy Prine, who's in obviously first time I remember Andy, and everybody's seen it, is the Miracle Worker, the Helen Keller story with Patty Duke and Anne Bancroft. He's the brother in that. And he did it on Broadway. So I was asking him great questions about that. But he and I had also done a TV movie together. And in that TV movie, Andrew shaved his head. And I remember it really influenced me when I finally saw the movie, because I didn't have any scenes with Andrew. I think it starred Deborah Raffin and Bruce Davidson. But Andrew shaved his head. And he was sort of imagined by the leading lady. She was sort of having a precognitive attachment to him. And he was a serial killer. A terrorist. I think he'd blown up a plane. And I realized, but not then, but I realize now with hindsight, that talking to Andrew about our working together on that project and how much it meant to me, it was a real good little TV movie. That's a major influence on Freddie, that Andrew had influenced Freddie. So with hindsight, that all-nighter and talking with Andrew Prine is something that I think I borrowed a little from his performance as Freddie. I remember great friends on that show. Jennifer Cook, her then husband, Robert Newman, the soap opera star. My dear friend, Jeff Yeager, whose brother did all my makeup on Nightmare on Elm Street for you.
The Yeager brothers.
Kevin Yeager, yeah. Jeff Yeager, wonderful actor who'd gone to Yale with my girlfriend, Yale Drama School. Kevin and I, and Michael Ironside, I got advice from Michael, lots of advice from Michael Ironside. Was Mickey Jones. We'd get Mickey Jones talking about, being Bob Dylan's drummer and stuff like that. Just great stories. We all got along, and there was parties every weekend, and we'd watch the show, and drink champagne. And I learned a lot on that show from Faye Grant. Faye was under contract, I believe, to NBC at that time. She'd done several shows for NBC. And Faye was difficult to act with sometimes on the show because she'd had dialogue where she had a lot of exposition and plot she had to spit out and pitch. And Faye also knew that because she was one of the stars, they were always going to err in the direction of cutting to a close-up of her, even when she had that kind of boring expository dialogue. And so Faye would turn her back to the camera or profile to the camera, or she would busy herself with a piece of business a lot. And then she would turn and reveal herself when she wanted that close-up. And I remember learning about relaxation in front of the camera on V because I had so many hours of on-camera time. And I remember also learning that thing from Faye about how you could kind of control how they cut you. And, you know, I also realized later on that as beautiful and photogenic as Faye Grant was, her real talent, and I see this a lot with actors, but her real talent as an actress, she's really a character actress, because I saw her later on Broadway in Singing in the Rain. And she played the girl that can't talk, the actress with a bad voice from silent films. And she was brilliant. She stole the show. I went to visit her backstage, and Andy Warhol and Leonard Bernstein were waiting to meet her.
Oh, wow.
And she also had a show on, I think it was on cable, where she played a kind of eccentric Auntie Mame role years later. And she was wonderful in that. I think she used a Southern accent. But yeah, Faye was gorgeous and sexy and beautiful, and the camera loved her. But she was, I think her real talent was a character actor. You know, Richard Gere is kind of that way. Richard's so beautiful, and and women love him, and he's, you know, a classic leading man. But I think his real gifts as an actor are a character actor. You know, you look at him in movies like Mr. Jones and roles like that, and even the one he did, I can't remember the name of it. He did that great movie with Andy Garcia where he plays the bad cop. But Richard.
Oh, that was the Jackal. I was thinking the Jackal.
Yeah, but Richard's great in character roles, and you see that sometimes. You know, sometimes people can be a prisoner of their good looks and not get. The people say, well, we're not going to waste his good looks in this character role, and yet they're probably the best actor for that role.
That's amazing. So one thing I wanted to talk to you about personally, because it's one of my favorite things you've done, is Phantom of the Opera. And you were amazing in Phantom of the Opera. You were able to create such a beautiful version of that story and unique. Can you talk about filming that?
Well, Phantom, Jessica, was supposed to be a duo of films. And that's one of the reasons I signed on, because I loved the idea of doing two of the films. And the second one was a great continuation. I got along great with the director. And my beloved Jill Schoelen, who looks more like a Christine than any actress who's ever played her. And that includes Emmy Rossum, who I adore. In a little piece of gossip, I remember at my home up in the Hollywood Hills, they were bringing actresses by to, you know, for me to meet, because I had, for some reason, maybe because they didn't pay me more money, I had like approval of my leading lady, and I didn't need that. I didn't require that, but it somehow came with my contract, I think. And I remember they brought Cynthia Nixon up.
Oh, wow.
And she had her hair very long and straight and blonde, and she was wonderful. I mean, I was a huge fan of Cynthia anyway. And at that moment in time, she was my first choice. I hadn't met Jill yet, and there was a conflict or something. She couldn't do it. But Jill just, not only is she a wonderful actress and she can sing, but Jill also looks like the classic Christine from the Gaston Leroux novel of Phantom of the Opera. But this was a contractual thing for me. I was signed up with 21st Century Films, which Cannon was also Cannon Films, Golden Globus. And they had just done Dingo's Got My Baby, you know, with Meryl Streep. And they were doing lots of movies at that time. And The Phantom was to be a 2-picture deal. And we shot it in Budapest, Hungary, which was a great adventure. And there were still Soviet soldiers on the streets then of Hungary. But we got to use the old Soviet studio outside of Budapest, which had a standing set of 1890s London.
Oh, wow.
With cobblestone streets and horse shit on the streets and carriages. And it had been used for a great production with Raul Julia and, oh gosh, just extraordinary actresses. Roger Daltrey from The Who. They had done 3 penny opera.
Oh, wow.
We were able to use their exterior sets And then we built our own interior sets. And then we also shot on location in the Old Town in Budapest. I was in my trailer one day, and it was they call it a trailer. This is Hungary, 1989, 1990, and it was a little tiny, what the English call a caravan, one of those little tiny rounded back trailers.
You had a box.
It's like 6 feet. You bump your head every time you stand up. And I was sitting in there because it was cold, and I was in full. I don't think I had the makeup on because I think I was just wearing the mask of Red Death for the opera sequence. Yeah. So I was, kind of tired. I've been working a lot. I think it was a Friday, and literally in the Old Town, my little trailer under a 500-year-old church on a cobblestone square in Old Pest, in Budapest, because it's Budapest. And this 1930s Bentley pulled up, and there was a funeral in the church, and a tall Christopher Lee, Peter Cushing man got out wearing a strange, almost frock coat with a cane. And he went into the church, and I was told by people in my cast that were extras in the opera sequence that it was one of the Habsburgs, literally one of the last of the Habsburgs coming to a funeral. And it just made you feel part of that time. But we Dwight Little and I had envisioned our Phantom of the Opera as a salute, as a toast, an homage to the great Hammer films of the 60s with the saturated color and all, starring Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing. And we changed it from the Paris opera, which the Gaston Leroux novel is set at, to the London of Jack the Ripper and the opera in London. And that way we sort of facilitated using wonderful actors like Stephanie Lawrence, who'd been in Evita on the West End, and Bill Nighy. I killed Bill Nighy in that film, Christine Bath. And we got wonderful actors from England, and it was pretty seamless with the accents then. We kind of bit into that mid-Atlantic accent, and that way we didn't have to pretend to be French, or we didn't have to shoot it in Paris, which is so expensive. We could shoot, it was easy for us to shoot there and double it for 1890s London and save some money, put the money up on the screen. But I've always wondered what would have happened had 21st century not broken up. And we've been able to do the subsequent film, which brings Eric Dessler, the Phantom of the Opera, it brings him to contemporary Manhattan. And he's living in the bowels of the earth, below the subway system, in the old train tunnels of New York, in an abandoned robber baron's train car. And he has a little Artful Dodger, a homeless kid, who's sort of the heading up his gang. And he survives down there while he's working on his opus, the opera that he can't finish, he can never finish. And one day while he's walking about in the tunnels, he barely hears this voice, this fabulous voice, and it inspires him to complete his opera. It's his muse. And of course, it's the new Christine in this secondary Phantom of the Opera. And she is a subway performer. She's one of those musicians that works down in the acoustics of the subway. And she's blind. And her father, an old immigrant, accompanies her on violin. And she sings Bach, and she sings these art songs and people leave her money in her father's hat or in his open violin case. And I befriend her. I cover my face in a fake skin, and I befriend her, but she's blind, so she doesn't see or sense anything abnormal with me. And I give her and I train her in my opera, in the role I've written for her. And her father is killed by punk, dog-collared Walter Hill. Walter Hill, New York's kids and bad boys. And I avenge her father's death. And then she's discovered singing my music in the subway. She's discovered by the New York City Opera. And they take her and they train her and they send her to doctors and they schedule a special operation for her eyes, and it's successful. And now she's going to have her debut at the New York City Opera, at the Metropolitan Opera. And of course, I have to go kill a couple of people, and there's skin on my face so that I can attend the opening. And I hear her sing on her debut, and I sneak out of the back of the Metropolitan Opera, and I walk down Fifth Avenue, and I open a manhole cover, and I lower myself down as the first snows fall of winter. And I go back to my train car beneath the streets of New York. You know, it's very romantic.
Oh,
but I love them. We never got to do it. We never got to do that.
That kills me. That hurts my soul that never happened.
Yeah, and you know, I really liked it because it was really would really be an opportunity for me to be vulnerable as the Phantom. I love the fact that below the surface of the streets, it was still another time. You know, it was still the 1890s down there.
Yeah.
Antique. His clothes were a little bit timeless, but he was also dealing with the future. You know, with the gangs, and he had his sort of. He was a bit like Fagin in Oliver Twist, because he had this group of boys that he sort of took care of, that were his gang, you know, that would bring him food and good wine, and he took care of them. You know, they were like I don't know if you've ever read about it, but there were people living, and there still are people living in the subways of New York. They call them old people, you know.
Yeah.
And some of them have little houses down there. They've managed to tap into electricity, and they have little refrigerators, and they live down there. They're homeless. You know, it's very, very kind
that
of
would have been
strange.
so beautiful. So I know we're running out of time, but I have one more question for you, and then a couple more fan questions really quickly. But one thing I wanted to ask you about in regards to Nightmare on Elm Street and your role as Freddy and your horror films that you've worked on, you know, thanks to documentaries like I Am Nancy and Scream Queen, we see that there's more of a subtext within Nightmare on Elm Street than just, oh, this guy's cracking jokes and he's killing people. You know, these films help people, and they empower women. They empower, outlying people. Can you talk about your take on the importance of these films and what you see within them yourself?
Well, one of the things I'm most proud of is the fact that our survivor girls are true survivor girls, and they do defeat Freddy. They do meet evil head on and use their wiles and their intelligence and their strength to overcome Freddy Krueger and also what Freddy symbolizes. And I'm also proud that I think, you know, with the exception of Sigourney's magnificent performance in 1979 in the original Alien and Jamie Lee in the original Halloween, we really filled the seats with the first horror fangirls for the entire franchise, which lasted 50 years from 1984 to 2004. And I'm real proud of that. I mean, I think that's really true. Because I know how many female fans we have and they're, of course, they're Heather's fans, and they're Lisa Wilcox's fans, and they're also, you know, Lisa Zane's fans, Monica Keena's fans, but I think that's really part of it. And I think that's part of what Wes Craven always intended, you know, in the Nightmare Bible, so to speak, was what they were really about. The movies are really about the girl. That's why when fangirls or girls that went back in the original 1984 theatrical release, when they went to see that movie with their boyfriend or their brother or girlfriends, they watched those movies differently. because they can't help but identify deeper, because the protagonist is a young woman. And it's her survival that the story is about, that leads you through the tale. And it's just a different reaction than boys have. Boys might be watching the special effects, or thinking that certain sequences are particularly cool, and they think Freddie's cool because he represents the experience of seeing the film. But girls are actually having that empathy, that connection with the leading lady, with Nancy and Alice and my daughter and the Monica Keena character. So it's just a Patricia Arquette character. They can't help that. That's just that's the way you watch a play or a movie or a television show. You or read a book even. You pick someone to kind of identify with, and I think that's real important. In remembering the franchise. I think that's really part of it. That our girls are smart and survivors and strong, and that's really part, a kernel of truth to the success of the franchise.
Wonderful. So I have a couple of fan questions for you really quickly. And I'm actually very excited about this because almost all of them are to do with your voice work that you do now, which I love your voice work.
Well, not unlike Freddie, some of my cartoon voices, they kind of mesh together because I've done so many, but go ahead, shoot.
You got it. Kent Fuller asks, any more upcoming DC projects, voice or otherwise? You were an amazing pick for the Scarecrow and Injustice 2.
Thank you. Well, one reason I had a little advantage, and so did the actor who played Bane in Injustice 2. Everybody else had to wear that kind of like medieval cone, like you're attending Carnival in Venice, that it looks like a beak. And they had a little camera down here on their mouth as they would do dialogue.
Really?
Sync with the animation. Motion capture.
Gotcha.
The mouth. But because Scarecrow has a fixed expression on his carved pumpkin, and Bane has the breathing mask on, I was able to forego wearing the sort of GoPro camera up my nose and put my cans on, my headset on, and really play with my voice as the Scarecrow. But it was wonderful for me because that job lasts 6 months because it takes so long for them to do it and to animate it. And I kept coming back. And again, I was saying earlier about Warner Brothers, that's one of my lots. I've worked a lot on that lot. Many movies, many TV shows, a couple of TV series. And I never got a star parking place ever in my whole career on the back lot of Warner Brothers. But when I did Scarecrow, the voice for Scarecrow, I got the best parking space on the whole lot. Every time I went, it was the same one. And I know because I've been there before for as far back as the Star is Born with Barbra Streisand. I know that it's the old First Artists building. And it's right next to Clint Eastwood's building, and it's right next to the New Line Cinema building, right when you come in the gate. And I think my parking space was either Clint Eastwood or Barbra Streisand's or somebody's old place. But I would come early when I was doing Scarecrow. And I would kind of lean against my car with my script, and look cool, just because everybody had to drive by me that came on the lot. It was like, what's Robert Englund doing? Robert Englund's back, Boy, he must be doing something big deal because he's got the best parking place on the lot, And it was fun for me. Finally, after all those years, I was rewarded with the hottest parking spot on the back lot at Warner Brothers. But it was fun for me, yeah. There's a distance trick because when they edit the game and wherever any individual player is on the game, depending upon your skill set, you're either closer to me or you're a certain distance away. Like it's the same thing with whichever character you pick. Like if I'm with Superman or I'm with Batman and he's, 25 feet away. And so I have to say the line, go back to Smallville, asshole. Or I'm a little closer and it has to be, go back to Smallville, asshole. Or I'm up very close to him and it's intimate and it's more Clint Eastwood, go back to Smallville, asshole. So I had to do every line like 3 times because they have to play with that distance. So that's kind of tricky, and it wears on your voice a bit.
Right.
But you learn a lot. And I had done motion capture before on another game, Call of the Dead, with Michael Rooker and Danny Trejo and Sarah, Buffy the Vampire Killer, Sarah, and lots of and George Romero.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd done motion capture before, but this was never. I'd never done anything this extensive. So I really love doing Scarecrow, and I really love the way they conceived his look too. They're fun. Games are fun.
Great. So Kyle Snyder asks, and this has to do with your voice, how does having an iconic voice affect your daily life?
Well, I'm a Southern California guy, and I went to school in America, but I went to an English acting school. Mm-hmm. And the first thing I had to do was sort of get rid of my surfer. And if I'm talking, I still slip into that, dude, I can get up in here, and I never get up that high, but and when I narrated the famous John Milius movie, Big Wednesday, even at that point, and I was still an active surfer, but even then, I remember when I did that, the narration, I pinched my nose a little bit. I remember the 3 friends, and the Santa Ana winds were blowing. And I kind of did it just a little bit like I remember the guys, man. They were so cool. And I get, you get into that voice. But I changed my voice, I think, when I was about maybe 20, 21, because I was at the Royal Academy and I had, hours of voice every day. And you want to sound like an American. I am an American. But I can also switch to English pretty quick. I did a movie a couple of years ago called The Last Showing with Finn Jones. Terrible title. I wanted them to call it The Midnight Movie, but it's a great little film. Very sort of 70s De Palma.
Fantastic.
Great director, Phil Hawkins. And Finn is brilliant in this movie, really goes all out. And I'm really good in this movie. It's sort of my salute to Seance on a Wet Afternoon and Richard Attenborough's strange little quiet, repressed Englishman. And but I was shooting north of London on that film in a wonderful town. But the accent up there is very different. So all my crew, I wanted to do just a straight mid-Atlantic London accent. And everybody up there had that other accent, and I'm hearing them all day, and it was tricky, how that can just kind of infect you, I mean, the same thing happens when you're in the South for a while. You get a little Southern, you can't help it, because it's just so much fun to talk.
Yeah.
To slow down. And the same thing happens when you're in London for a while. You can't help but saying, brilliant. I just saw that new movie. It was so brilliant, because that's how they talk. And it just happens to you. You're hearing it 100% of the time. And, and even the same thing happens a bit in Italy. I mean, I don't speak Italian, but I speak enough to order food and to ask directions and to be personable. And you hear yourself in the lilt after a while, Buongiorno, hey, it just sort of happens to you. Yeah. But my voice, if I'm angry or if I'm working the voice on a talk show for a second, if I'm teasing the weatherman on Good Morning Kansas City or something, then, people will jump. I had an experience at one of the cons a couple of years ago. I can't sing worth a damn, but I knew I had a great microphone. I could tell. I could hear the sound coming out of the speakers, and I knew this was a really expensive, beautifully balanced microphone. And I was taking my time and being a little mellifluous with my voice, talking to the fans, and slowing down a bit. And somebody asked me to sing the Freddie song the Little Jump Rope Girls do. And so I began to sing it a little bit in my Freddie voice, but also I started it in a little girl's voice, 1, 2, Freddy's coming for you. And I forgot how potent that song is to people's memory. And literally, there was a half a dozen people that couldn't listen to it, that had to leave the theater. That was
wow.
like 2,000 people. It was a big Q&A. Maybe it was Comic-Con down in San Diego. I can't remember because they have a lot of money to spend down there. But that's that thing about the voice is if I'm teasing or kidding and I drop into the Freddy voice, or somebody requests it at the airport or in a bar or something, I have to be careful because the lady with the tray of drinks walking by me, she might jump out of her underwear.
The power of the voice. That's fantastic.
Power of the voice, yeah.
Oh, wow. Well, sir.
Bring me another round, bitch.
And crash. Sir, thank you so much, Mr. England. This has been just fantastic.
Thank you. And I just want to say a little addendum here, a little postscript for the fans. I miss the cons. I miss, getting the feedback on my short-lived series, True Terror, that was on the Travel Channel.
That's great.
And I've got a lot of stuff that I'm waiting, for the COVID people to say yes to, that I want to talk to the fans about, that I can't yet. But also just to see the fans and to see the new merchandising and new action figures and the cool stuff, and talk about all the new films we like. I during the COVID, I was watching some interesting stuff, the new Penny Dreadful and other things. I just heard it was canceled, which is unfortunate. Yeah. Now I'm watching the new Lovecraft show.
Oh, it's fantastic.
Yeah. So, there's different things. There's some stuff coming that I'm looking forward to. I'll tell you, we all have cable now, and we all have we can get the big subtitles. Everybody should check out Sputnik, the Russian alien. Ooh. The girl is phenomenal. And the show, the creature is phenomenal. No spoiler alert further, but it's worth seeing. Yeah. It's kind of a retro Russian alien. I liked it. I think it's worth seeing when I get some pizza, have a good time.
If you haven't seen Umbrella Academy, that's fantastic.
Well, I've heard it's like on my list.
It's so good. Okay. Well, Mr. England, thank you again so much. It is always a pleasure to talk to you. You're one of our living legends. You've taken, in my mind, you're on the level of Vincent Price of our modern legends, and I can't give
Vincent back here too.
Oh anyway, my God.
Anyway, I got a great postcard of Vincent. Anyway, I love Vinny, and I can remember, getting stoned and going to see the Dr. Phibes movies. But I also, love Vincent Price ever since I saw Laura, the great Otto Preminger film. And, he went out with such class, starring with Lillian Gish. Mm-hmm. Lillian Gish, there she is.
Right there.
Lillian Gish and Betty Davis in The Whales of August.
Yes.
A great little film, classy film to go out on. I had a dear friend, a roommate, who was Vincent Price's dresser when Vincent Price toured doing Oscar Wilde.
Oh, yeah.
And he told me that Vincent Price was a phenomenal collector of American art, and that after he passed away, much of that collection was taken over by Steve Martin, so now we know it's in good hands.
Oh, wow. That's fantastic. Well, sir, thank you so much. I can't wait to hear what you're doing next when you're allowed to talk about it. And hopefully, yep, I understand. But hopefully soon I'll get to see you in person, shake your hand, and buy you a cup of coffee.
I think you guys, we're all going to get together in 2021. Yep. And we're all going to be, horny and happy and drinking in the hotel bars and looking at all the cool new stuff that all the illustrators and all the action figure creators have come up with during COVID, in their little studios. And I hope they're all busy, and get to talk to the fans again. It's going to be fun. Get it back on the road.
Exactly. Thank you, sir, again. And you stay safe, and we'll see you next year.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching our show. If you like what you see, please subscribe to our Joe Blow Videos channel. Tell your friends who like this sort of content and turn on the bell to receive notifications for all of our latest videos. We're an independent company and we appreciate all of your support.